Hello. I'm not sure if anybody's watching this yet. No idea. Awesome. Hello, everybody. How are you? So I wanted to start off this. So a guy named Joseph is going to be joining me in just a few minutes. I'm not sure how good this is going to be because I'm still trying to figure it out. As my friend Robert would say, I'm a boomer. So we'll see how this works. Does anybody know how to make it where I can see the comments without looking at the YouTube feed? Because I'm on Zoom. So how do you check the comments from Zoom? Does anybody know that? Anyways, I'm not really clear what we're going to be talking about. So I anticipate that it's going to be a little bit of a debacle. That not only that, but the delay is going to drive me crazy. So we'll see how this goes. I'm not sure when or if Joseph's going to be joining. So it's supposed to start in a couple of minutes. I'm just doing this to make sure everything works. Everybody can hear me? Sound good? I'm using I am using dual screen on a computer. Okay, that's what I figured that people are doing probably. They're checking both. Okay, so yeah, that makes sense. I'm not sure if I want to do that. I am doing fine, Ryan. I am doing Zoom on the computer. Yeah. I don't know that I need anybody to tag in, and if I do, he'll feel beat up, Lion. So we'll see how this goes. I I'm expecting exactly a train wreck. So that's what I'm anticipating. Nothing nothing short of an absolute what we would call a debacle. So hopefully it's not that. Let's hope that Joseph is a little bit more coherent. And so, but who knows? We'll see it. Is he running? I don't think he's running. He doesn't know who I am, which is fine. Nobody needs to know who I am. I'm not that important. So I am gonna do this. Popcorn with extra butter. So Alma, we're discussing. I don't know yet. So it looks like something to do with Trinitarian stuff. And again, there's a delay. It looks like. So yeah, we'll have to see where we get with this. He hasn't joined yet. Let me message him and see where he is. Oh, I could do more streams, I suppose. So this is taking over for the what they call Travis Tuesday. So I will post some stuff on Tuesday, but it won't be anything real fancy. Yeah, I'm not sure what it's going to be over. He doesn't seem to be real cognizant of what's going on. I've got him trying to figure it out. Robert is typing an American accent. Joseph Smith has a clean. Joseph Smith has a clean mouth, no live editing. That Ohio Riz. Oh, I did not see an Alex O'Connor, Dan McClellan response. Daniel Ortner contends that Moses and John weren't translated, that they died. Okay. I don't know how you would know either way. So we have modern revelation that indicates that Moses, John, Elijah, the three Nephites were in some way changed from their mortal state to a state of immortality, but not resurrected. And they may now yet be resurrected, or what we call in the church vernacular, twinkled. They may have been twinkled. But yeah, Daniel Ortner can contend whatever he wants, but he's just saying that. And Daniel Ortner is a sola scriptura type person, so that's what he would be basing it on. So, but who knows? Who knows what people are going to do? Let me see if he's going to. You'll have to click. Yeah, apparently he's not wanting to join. So we might have him. He's changing the parameters now, so he might not be joining. Unfortunately, we might just be having our own little thing. If he doesn't join, I suppose what we'll do is the audio cutting. Sorry, but if he doesn't join, what we'll have to do is we can just go through my slides that I made for this discussion, and that'll be what we do. But now it is awesome that we're right on time, Cade. Sorry for those of you who we'll see. I'm not sure what we're going to get. You know, I don't watch the commentaries on a lot of the church commentaries. I watch them occasionally. I do so much work with the missionaries that I don't have a lot of time. I read books and I listen to books, and I'm not really sure uh, what a lot of the stuff is. I've watched a few. I'm not so arrogant as to think I can't learn something from Come Follow Me broadcasts, and certainly religious professors from BYU and people who are trained in theology and religion. I think that that's always a good thing to do, but it's really important that we recognize what's going on around it. So, Joseph, are you going to join? He's not wanting to join. Not sure why he doesn't want to join. What a bummer. But like I said, if he doesn't join, yeah, he's late. If he doesn't join, I guess I can just go through what I was going to present to him. I'm not sure what this was supposed to be. He kind of indicated it was going to be a debate. But based on his prompt, the Book of Mormon teaches God is eternal past and future, which is true. Not teaching, using keyword Trinity and modalism language. Well, again, I wouldn't have any problem with that prompt. So I don't know what he's exactly trying to support with that claim, or why exactly it is that he's thinking that he's not. Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm not sure what he's doing. So I imagine that what's going to happen is he'll be saying that I chickened out because I didn't join his. I don't know. Does somebody want to join? I don't care. Somebody want to join? Can't have everybody. But let's see. Let's see. Let's see. How do I do this? If somebody wants to message me on Facebook, if you want to message me on Facebook, and again, I've got to be careful with who I do. Joseph, were you going to come on? I'm not sure if you're there. I wish somebody would. Hold on, I'm going to do a check real quick, make sure my headphones are working. Yeah, it should be. Hello? Yeah. Okay, so that should be working. So I don't want to have 9,000 people joining, but I'm going to, if you want to join. Anyways, I can let a few people on if he's not going to join. Let's see. Yeah, because yeah. We have YouTube won't let me. I only have 2 shorts. YouTube won't let you join a Zoom. Why would that matter? Yeah, I'm not sure why that would matter. Well, tell him to go. Yeah. Chandler Hendry. Hello, Chandler. Ha! How's it going, bro? I'm going to call you bro now, bro.
Bro.
Let's be bros. Let's do
Be
bro
bros
stuff.
on you. He ran away. I wanted to call him out. Be like, I thought I was the runner.
Chandler Hendry. So yeah, I'm not sure what the deal is with him, but let's see, what was his name? Joseph Zamora. And his TikTok was Joey Z Timepiece.
I've never heard of him.
Yeah, he says you run from him.
Timepiece.
Yeah, not sure how that. Yeah.
He ran away. I'm sad.
Yeah, because you know what's terrible is I spent some time putting together a presentation for him. But yeah, apparently he's on his own Facebook. Nobody's watching it. And I'm sure he's complaining about what a
Did you
jerk I
find
am.
him?
No, I'm not going to go look at it. I don't.
Okay.
I don't have, I'm not,
I was
I'm,
about
I'm
to go
too,
look for it for you.
yeah, I'm too tired to do that kind of stuff.
Too much effort, huh?
Now, if you joined and you're in the waiting room, if you want to join, I just can't let everybody in. The only person that joined was Chandler, so who goes by Restored. So if anybody else wants to join, I don't have any problem with anybody else joining. I've really never done one of these live streams before,
You haven't.
so nope, I have not. Yeah. So, well, and I've tried to have him join 3 TikTok lives and this YouTube thing.
You just won't
So
do it, huh?
he keeps saying that he can't, or so he says that he doesn't have enough viewers on YouTube to join. I'm not sure why that would
That
matter.
wouldn't matter on a Zoom. Yeah, that wouldn't matter at
Yeah,
all.
Zoom. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, because I know when I had no channel at all, I joined people's lives all the time.
Yeah,
So I don't know.
that wouldn't work.
Hello, Dimitri. But what I can do is I can show people the slides and kind of the argument I was planning on making. It might be productive. Um,
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, that'd be. Yeah, sure.
I
This.
can go
Yeah.
through. I can go through a bunch of stuff I was going to go through.
Did he ask you
So,
questions of what he wanted to go on?
oh, it was all the problem. That was the problem is I couldn't pin him down on what exactly he wanted to talk about or address, and all I could gather was that it was something to do with it says the Book of Mormon teaches God is eternal, past and future, using not teaching using keyword Trinity and modalism language. There's no punctuation in that statement, so I added 2 commas where it says past and future using comma not teaching using keyword Trinity and modalism, and he has a key where I would have put another comma, but yeah, I'm not I'm not clear what we were going for. So yeah, but yeah, I'm apparently he's on his own. If anybody wants to go find him on his own Facebook and see what he's up to, um, I'm not sure what he's doing or why he was, because he was very much. I'm a big jerk because I was running away and I'm afraid and I don't want anybody to see this and I don't want anybody to know and I'm trying to keep it secret and heaven forbid you know, heaven forbid anybody should know who I am. And and I said, I'm relatively unknown, but I do have a channel and I do post some discussions and I do join TikTok lives and there's a few dozen people who know who I am and they would probably watch it. But I said, but he has like no nothing. I mean, he hasn't done
No
any social media
relevance.
anything.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and I'm not saying that's bad. Good for him, maintaining anonymity. Good for him.
Right.
But ultimately, I just, but he was just all about let's publish this and you're going to be embarrassed and I'm going to destroy you. And that's what it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, so I expected that he'd absolutely be here. Hey, Dimitri, how are you? Not to ignore
Can
you.
you hear me?
Yeah, I'm not trying to ignore you or anything.
Oh, I've just been sitting here. I don't have my webcam. I could get it,
No,
but
you're fine. Yeah, you're fine. Yeah.
sweet.
Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen and do my, let's see, where is my share? Let me make sure that this works on the, let's see. Can you see it, Chandler?
Yeah.
I can see it.
Yeah, that looks good.
Because I can't see it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop share. I'm going to move it to where it's on I've got a couple of screens over here. I can't see it where it's at. Oh,
Do I have a lot of background noise?
I don't hear anything.
Okay, good.
Yeah, you're still finding me. Let's see. Chandler, screen share. This share. Aha, that's more like it. Let's see, slideshow. Let's see. I never can remember this thing. Like slideshow, there it is from beginning. Okay. Now, which one is that? Now, which one can you see? Can you see the one where it's small and it says next slide?
Yeah, we can
I can see the whole thing.
Yeah, we can see the whole thing.
Where the whole screen is full?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, good. All right, that means I can't see the YouTube anymore. So if you guys want to watch the comments, and can you guys see the comments on your end?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my screens are all covered now, so I can't see. So anyways,
He
he says
looking good, Travis.
Okay, good. It says the Book of Mormon teaches God is eternal, past, and future. I added the commas because there's no punctuation in this, and I'm accepting the key as another piece of punctuation. So that's what I'm doing. That was basically what he was trying to do. Then he said this, he made this comment. It says, so they're coming to see it harmonious with Book of Mormon, which is the authority to fit with later revelations from Joseph that are polytheism, fundamentally different. Unfortunately, there's no reconciliation. From my conversations, I assume that what he means by this is that Joseph Smith said something in the past that is contradictory from what he said later on in his ministry, which is a very common claim. And so I am going to half-assedly address that concern to the degree that I'm capable of doing so. And you guys are welcome to chime in as you see fit or as you feel prompted by the Spirit to do so. This is a lot. This is basically just the title page of the Book of Mormon, so you don't need to read the whole thing. The red was really all I'm trying to do. I hate it when people put slides up that are just solid text. But if the first thing that he was suggesting is that we don't believe Jesus is God, pretty typical. And so this is always a good refutation of that the purpose of the Book of Mormon, most of this is probably written by Moroni, says to come forth by the gift and power of God unto the interpretation thereof sealed by the hand of Moroni, and also to the convincing of Jew and Gentile that Jesus is the Christ, the eternal God, manifesting himself to all nations. And so that's a pretty clear identifier that Jesus Christ is the eternal God. Now, where the Book of Mormon can become quite confusing as to its Christology and its understanding of the nature of God and the Godhead is that the book presupposes God of Israel, and it also presupposes that Jesus is the God of Israel. And this is identified pretty clearly in several passages in the New Testament where you read them and they identify that Jesus is the God. Romans, Galatians have suggestions of this, Hebrews, where it indicates, in Colossians even, where it indicates that Jesus is the God who is the God of Israel. He's the one that made the covenant with Israel. So I wanted to kind of point out this specific understanding, and this is always a good anti-Trinitarian conceptualization. So to kind of backtrack a bit, I don't disagree with the premise of his original point, namely that, so this original point that he says, I don't disagree with this. The Book of Mormon teaches that God is eternal, past and future, which is clearly identified, that Jesus is the eternal God. It's not teaching the Trinity, but it's using Trinitarian language. So the argument there is not that it's using Trinitarian language. So Joseph Smith isn't borrowing specifically or identifiably clear or concise Trinitarian language, because that would actually have to come from the creeds. What he's actually doing is he's just repeating the same conceptualization of God in the Book of Mormon, and this is from the assumption that he wrote it, obviously, not that he transmitted it through the gift and power of God, as Latter-day Saints believe. But that if he wrote it, he's just using the same language that's found in the New Testament. He's not using any of the creedal language that would conform with or support a Trinitarian understanding of God. And I think that 1 Nephi chapter 1 is a very clear understanding of the nature of God. It says, and it came to pass as he prayed unto the Lord, this speaking of Lehi, there came a pillar of fire and dwelt upon a rock before him, and he saw and heard much. And because of the things which he saw and heard, he did quake and tremble exceedingly. And it came to pass that he turned to his own house at Jerusalem, and he cast himself upon his bed, being overcome with the Spirit, and the things which he had seen, and being overcome with the Spirit, he was carried away in a vision. Even that he saw the heavens open, and he thought he saw God sitting upon his throne, surrounded by numberless concourses of angels in the attitude of singing and praising their God. And it came to pass that he saw one descending out of the midst of heaven, and he beheld that his luster was above the sun at noonday. And he also saw 12 others following with him. So here you have an indication of God sitting on his throne, and another one who is Christ descending down with the 12 others, which of course we understand are the apostles. And he saw 12 others, and their brightness did exceed that of the stars of the firmament, and they came down and went forth among the face of the earth. And they first came and stood before my Father, and gave unto him a book and bade that he should read. So that's a really important point, because again, it's this understanding that these 12 would give scriptures or texts or an understanding. They would convey knowledge, which is what the symbolism of a book is. And so I think that that's a pretty clear reference that the Father and the Son are distinct and separate individuals, if you find in another passage. I just wanted to kind of look at this. Do you have anything to say about that, Chandler? Dimitri?
No.
You don't need to raise your hand. Just unmute yourself and start
Sorry,
talking.
I just figured so you could see that.
But no, you're fine.
But I guess as sort of a preliminary note, my question, I kind of want your opinion on this as I approach maybe any text, especially like the Book of Mormon. I'd say the Book of Mormon has a probably more unified voice about things, but part of me is open to the idea of
and I would agree with that because of the editorial nature of it, where you've got a record keeping class who are transmitting and producing and reproducing over time materials, and teaching the same consistent theology. At least the record keeping classes, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. But I guess another part of me still wants to ask if maybe it would still be kind of an over expectation to expect that like something like the nature of God is just always consistently presented in the same way, because I'm not sure if I think it is. What do you think about that?
So I think that no. So the nature of God actually can change over time. So Lehi has a dream. It doesn't mean that everybody understood the nature of the dream. So the argument is that it's more specific than that. That the nature and understanding of God can certainly be different among prophets, where they don't understand or they don't have a clear picture of something. So they're teaching consistent with their understanding of God. And that may look inconsistent. But what the claim is, of course, that Joseph was making is that the Book of Mormon is inconsistent and teaches Trinitarian doctrines, but that Joseph Smith later refutes those doctrines. That's what his point was. And so the purpose is that if Joseph Smith, again, assuming Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Mormon or was the key producer of the text, 1 Nephi chapter 1, 9-11 indicate that there is not that's not what's going on. What's going on is that there is a God who sits on a throne, and another entity or being separates from God, who's filled with glory and light, and descends with 12 others. So again, the idea of a Trinitarian image is not found in that text. And this is one of the earliest writings of Joseph Smith would be this, at least one of the earliest published writings of Joseph Smith. So we have this as early as 1830. So the Book of Mormon, claiming the Book of Mormon is Trinitarian, I think is refuted by the text itself. Not only the fact that it doesn't have the creedal language. If Joseph Smith wanted to teach the Trinity, he did a very poor job of it, because he should have borrowed from the creedal language that was then prevalent in his day. But he didn't. He doesn't use consubstantiality. He doesn't use homoousis. He uses the language from the New Testament, which as we're going to kind of demonstrate. So I was going to try and demonstrate. I don't know that Joseph would have been able to follow this argument, because it's relatively complex and technical. I think it's pretty simple, but I think it's more complex and technical than he's really capable of. This is a little bit more difficult, and a lot of people are confused by this Mosiah 15, 1-5, where he says, I would that ye should understand that God himself shall come down among the children of men and shall redeem his people. Again, the God of Israel is who he's referring to, and the God of Israel is Jesus. And this is where I think that Latter-day Saints often get confused, because they'll read the Book of Mormon and people outside of the church, and they think that God is not referring to the pre-incarnate Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus is God that's being referred to here. And because he dwelleth in the flesh, he shall be called the Son. This is actually very technical theology, because you've got this understanding of, remember, the Father and the Son are co-eternal. Their relationship is one of a covenant relationship, of a subordinate relationship, where the Father is premier over the Son, and the Son is in subjection to the Father as a consequence of his relationship with the Father, then the unity that they share eternally. And so it says that he becomes the Son because of his flesh. And so this seems to suggest that the idea of Jesus being begotten in the flesh, the fact that he came into mortality with the Father, God the Father, as his only Son, that's the way in which he is the Son. But Abinadi is specifically saying that he's the Son, or the Son of God, because he came into the world as a mortal. He enters into immortality. And having subjected the flesh to the will of the Father, so again, in the flesh he's subjected to his Father, thereby he becomes the Son. And having subjected his flesh to the will of the Father, being the Father and the Son, again, because he's God and he's the Son because of his subjection, the Father because he was conceived by the power of God, thus more specific language, and the Son because of the flesh, thus becoming the Father and the Son. And they are one God, yea, the very eternal Father of heaven and earth, and thus the flesh becoming subject to the Spirit, or the Son to the Father, being one God, suffereth temptation, and yieldeth not to the temptation, but suffereth himself to be mocked and scourged and cast out and disowned by his people. And so this understanding of Abinadi is actually often used to support a Trinitarian ideal. And I think it's from people who just aren't reading it very consistently or clearly and breaking it apart, because I think the language is a little bit difficult to navigate, certainly, but I don't think it supports a consubstantial triune God in any degree, specifically with the understanding of the text. Again, as you stated, Dimitri, it's more univocal in its construction. The Book of Mormon is. And then third, go ahead.
Travis, would it be right to say Mosiah 15 is positing the idea that Jesus is the eternal Father of the covenant?
So I think that that's what they would have understood as their God. So again, our God, this idea of the God of Israel. This is kind of again, there's a lot of layers of presuppositions that they would have had as a consequence of their own religion. Now, to what degree, by the time Abinadi is on the scene, they still hold the same kinds of understandings as we see in the Hebrew scriptures with respect to the nature of the God of Israel, like the idea of gods of other nations, as we see in Deuteronomy 32, where you have a high God as apportioning nations. Whether they're understanding it that way, or maybe they view that the God of Israel took us out of the ancient world, brought us here, and all of this land belongs to the God of Israel, which I don't know that would bear out, because obviously other nations and other groups of people it can conflict with them, and they don't believe in the same God. Right. So the Lamanites are believing in a different kind of deity, but at least to some degree. Their religion obviously isn't well known to what they're teaching. We have some evidences, like in Ammon's interactions with King Lamoni, where he's like, what is God? And he's like, the Great Spirit, and that is God. And he just kind of keeps it simple for purposes of that interaction and doesn't overly complicate it. But
I have a question.
Yeah.
As far as this passage I know a lot of people, including myself, have really struggled with maybe the logic and the language of it. And I agree it's kind of difficult, but and maybe I'm not sure exactly what they would be thinking about the nature of God. Like you said, this is important, but my inference as of late has been that the logic and rhetoric is secondary to the fact that Abinadi is on trial with lawyers who are familiar with the scriptures and the law. And he's probably trying to avoid any accusation that he's saying God is not one. And what do you think about that?
I think that he knows that his goose is cooked. So I don't think that Abinadi, I mean, you have that as the preliminary argument that Abinadi has against going back.
Yeah.
I think he knows that if I go back,
he knows what's coming.
Yeah. I don't think he has any illusions about preserving or saving his own life. I think he knew this was a one-way trip when he bought the ticket. So,
Okay.
yeah, I think that he's boldly declaring whatever he understands and believes to be true, and he's doing so without any fear. And I think that like he says throughout the speech. In fact, I don't exactly remember the verse, but as he preaches for these couple of chapters, he says, "And once I'm done, it doesn't matter what you do to me. I'm going to finish." And that's when he starts to have the illustrious glow. But I'm going to finish what I came here to say, and then you can do whatever you want with me. But just know that if you do whatever you want with me, God will return that upon your heads. So that's kind of his little hook in there. So it doesn't stop him from being flayed, though. This is I think 3rd Nephi chapter 11 is pretty consistent. It speaks of, I mean, Jesus, where the way I kind of reject the Trinity is in circumstances like this. So anytime you've got other issues where, hold on a second, let me stop sharing and find out who's here. So who's here? Microsoft account. Sorry, I'm not sure if everybody was enjoying that.
We were, Travis.
Yes.
You're good. I don't know.
This is the Minecraft account. Minecraft account.
Hello? Are you there? Nope. Maybe it was the dude.
Maybe. Well, I would have liked to have had him on. I can finish my majigger. I don't like that I can't see the comments. Let me know if anybody comments and says, "Hey, this is really boring. Let's talk about something else." That's fine. If anybody thinks this is boring, we can talk about whatever we want. I'm gonna
I think
stick on here for another few minutes, and then if anybody's comes up with a better thing to talk about, we'll do that instead. So let me. Okay, let me start my slideshow again. There it is. Okay. See it? Yeah. So I think that this idea, behold, I am Jesus Christ, whom the prophets testified shall come into the world, and behold, I am the light and life of the world. I have drunk of that cup which the Father hath given me. So the way that I look at it is, if you're thinking Trinitarian, right, you would have to already believe in the Trinity for any of this language to be Trinitarian. You already have to have that understanding, and they don't. Ancient Israelites do not have a Trinitarian understanding of God. So you have two options. You either have to pretend that there's some other source for this Trinitarian philosophy, that the ancient Israelites, both in the Bible and the Book of Mormon, which repeats the same kind of rhetoric, that they have this thing, and then you'd have to support where they got it. And if you're viewing that, because they don't have this conceptualization of a triune God who's one in substance, and I'm sorry, the Shema doesn't work. They don't view the Shema as a Trinitarian idea.
Love the Shema.
Yeah, and there's the idea that it's one of the reasons why, and I'll show you in a minute, why New Testament scholars don't focus on whether or not the Hebrew Bible teaches the Trinity, because they think it's a given that it just doesn't. So Hebrew scriptures don't teach the Trinity. But anyways, it's like, so if he says, and behold, I am the light of the world. So imagine Jesus talking to you in the ancient world. He's just come down out of heaven. You just heard a voice, behold, my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased, in whom I have glorified my name. Hear ye him. And then he comes down and you're like, oh, that's the same guy that was just talking to me. I don't think you're thinking that. You're thinking there's a voice, and then Jesus comes and appears and says, I have drunk out of that bitter cup which the Father hath given me, and have glorified the Father in taking upon me the sins of the world, in the which I have severed the will of the Father in all things from the beginning. Whatever the Trinity is, whatever you conceptualize it as, I don't think any of these people could have had that conceptualization from their actual interactions with Jesus, his words, and hearing the voice of his Father. And then again, he says, after this manner ye shall baptize in my name, for behold, verily I say unto you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost are one. and I am in the Father, and the Father in me, and the Father and I are one. Again, this is not connoting consubstantiality. And they are not understanding, with Jesus physically standing there, that the voice they had just previously heard from God the Father is the same voice as the person who's there talking to them. They're not thinking that. And if they're not thinking that, what are they thinking? And anybody who says, well, that's not what the Trinity is identifying. It separates them as two persons, but consubstantially one God. Okay, fine. But you see how that requires nuance, explanation, technicality, things that aren't found in the scriptures. Those nuanced technicalities and explanations are just simply not found in these texts. And again, this is another example of Jesus that clarifies that he's, once again, if you needed clarity, that he's the God of the Hebrew Bible. He's the God of the Old Testament. And he identifies this is the body which you see. This is what the Moroni 8:18 that people often say, God doesn't change. I am God. I don't change. I don't understand that, because they would have to agree with the idea that we are created in the image of God, specific language. They can interpret that however they choose. Behold, this body which you now behold is the body of my spirit, and man have I created after the body of my spirit, even as I appear unto thee in the spirit, will I appear unto thee, unto my people in the flesh. And that's Ether 3:14 to 15, 3:14 through 16. So again, you've got this understanding that he is actually explaining that he is going to progress. He's going to change. He's going to become different than he is there standing in front of the brother of Jared. So, and I have this big long thing, and it's I don't know that I need to read all this, but in order for the Book of Mormon to teach the Trinity, the concepts of consubstantiality, homoousios, identified by later Christian writers and later philosophers with respect to their impositions of these ideas on the New Testament texts, would have to have been found in the Book of Mormon as well. So if this idea is not found in the biblical texts, it can't be found in the Book of Mormon that uses the same language, which is what the crux of Joseph's entire argument was. So usually resulting from an ignorance of just saying I and the Father are one is usually the kind of superficial argument that's being made by Trinitarians. While they'll say, hey, this argument's really complicated. But again, I think it's refuted clearly by John 17. And this is John 17 here, and I put most of the chapter here where he's identifying it, verses 6 through 26. So if you'll just remember John 17, 6 through 26, he says, I have made your name known. Again, think about the apostles sitting there with the Lord in prayer, listening to him pray on their behalf. And they're thinking, wow, this guy is consubstantial with the Father. He is the second person of the one God that's one in substance with it's just this that's idea would have to have been taught. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought too. Yeah. That's what I've been thinking. I'd be like, yeah, this is the second person of the consubstantial Trinity talking to the first person of the consubstantial Trinity. They just wouldn't have thought that. They would have thought that just plain language. They would have just understood it the way you just understand it. I have made your name known to those who gave me from the world. Go ahead.
I was going to say, there is a question if you want to answer it, or do you want to finish?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. What's the question?
Someone said, hey, Travis, a related topic question. What would you say our doctrine of Jesus being the only begotten of the Father in the flesh implies?
I think that it implies specifically what it's saying, that the only Son of God. I think that Jesus is the begotten, the homogenesis. I think that's what it is. He's the unique Son. So that's one way of interpreting that phrase. The other one is the idea that he's the only Son of God in the flesh. None of the rest of us are born of God in the way that Jesus was. Now that becomes a little bit more technical in the sense that the first man, Adam, and the first woman, Eve, such that that's the case, their bodies were probably formed by Jesus. And we as Latter-day Saints, we perform that fact in the endowment when we talk about the creation in the temple, that Jesus is the one through whom God organized to form the earth and the bodies of Adam and Eve, and into them he placed the spirits of Adam and Eve to give them life. But as the one who formed the bodies of the first man and the first woman, that would make Jesus the Father. But his body, it looks like from Luke chapter 1, and I never can remember if it's 36 or 39, but it talks about the power of the Holy Ghost shall come upon you, and the power of the highest shall overshadow you, such that the thing in your belly will be called the Son of God. Whatever that means. I always ask people whenever they question our theology about the birth and the conception of Jesus, what that means, and nobody seems to have any understanding of what it means to have the Holy Ghost come upon you and the power of the highest to overshadow you. I don't know what that means. I have no understanding of that. But whatever that is, that caused that Jesus is the only begotten Son in the flesh. He's the only Son of God, that he is the literal Father of in the flesh. And so that's how I understand it anyway. I could be completely off base, but I don't know. That's what I think. I ask not only, but he talks about in John 17, I ask not only on behalf of these, but also on behalf of those you will believe through me. So again, he expands his understanding of one. So he says, all mine are yours and yours are mine, and I have been glorified in them. And now I am no longer in the world. They are in the world, and I am coming to you. Holy Father, protect them in your name you have given me, that you may be one as we are, that they may be one as we are one. I ask not only on behalf of these. Now he's not only praying for the apostles, but he's praying for anybody who believes on them, that they may also be one. As you, Father, are in me, I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. The glory that you have given me, I give. See, I never understand how they don't dissect John 17 in the same way they dissect in a Trinitarian perspective other passages they use as Trinitarian proof texts. And so I think that as you read John 17, I think it becomes abundantly clear that that's not really what's being intended. And this is another passage, John 14. I think that this is relevant to, again, Jesus speaking to the apostles. That's the setting. He's speaking to them, and he says, Philip says, Lord, show us the Father, and we will be satisfied. Jesus says, have I been with you all this time, Philip, and you do not know me? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say then, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words that I say unto you, I do not speak on my own, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. But if you do not, then believe because of the works themselves. Very truly I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do. In fact, will do greater works than these, because I am going to the Father. I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If in my name you ask me for anything, I will do it. So again, I think that this is pretty clear, at least insofar as it is clear, that Jesus is not talking about himself as being the Father, but rather that he is alike, kind, shares attributes, shares thoughts, understanding, does the will of, etc., of his Father. So I think that that's pretty clear on that, at least on that front.
Yeah. I always like to posit the idea of John 17 and John 10:30, that the author of John uses the same Greek word hen to describe one, and he's not using it differently. So the concept has to be the same, because it's the same structure.
Yeah, in fact, the only time ousia, which is the Greek word for substance, is used in the entire New Testament is during the parable of the prodigal son, when the prodigal son asks, give me the ousia, give me the substance that falls to me. So the authors would have understood and known that word, certainly, but they never use it. They never use it with relation to the substance of the Father, the nature or character of God in any context. They simply use the word one. And they use the same word one that they use in John 10 as they use in John 17. John's using the same word throughout. He's not identifying a different kind of oneness or unity that's found between the different texts. And so, again, you're still at this level where you have to know what the underlying beliefs of these people were, and that is missing. We don't really know. We have some evidences that kind of appear, but there's a lot of weird things that it looks like they believed that are reflected in some of the questions and some of the statements that are being made from the apostles but we're not entirely clear what exactly was going on in their little heads. How did they understand spirit? Did they understand a premortal existence or a premortal world, as seems to be indicated in their question to Jesus about the blind man in John 9? What are they understanding? How do they view things? What is a spirit? Spirits look like humans, as it says in Luke 24, I guess. When they see Jesus, they suppose that that's a spirit, not some immaterial, non-existent force or entity or being, but it's a physical looking being that looks like a man. That's how they viewed spirits, because that's what they thought they were seeing. So again, you have to kind of go into some of this more complicated dissection of the texts and realize that if you think that you can ferret it all out without the benefit of having a modern seer or prophet to help you, I don't know. Now this is the common. He said he was going to talk about. So Joseph said, "I'm just going to read from the Book of Mormon, but then we're going to read from the King Follett Sermon, the Doctrine and Covenants, the Pearl of Great Price." And he says, "But we're just reading the Book of Mormon." He says, "So just bring your Book of Mormon, but then we're going to see how that differs from the King Follett Sermon and all the other stuff." And I'm like, that's not just a Book of Mormon reading. We're not just going to sit down and read the Book of Mormon then, if that's what you're thinking we're going to do.
Well, they always
that's
do,
not what's
Travis.
I think
that's
They always do that.
I think I know what's going on in John. So my theory is that when John sat down and he wrote chapter 17 at the top of the page, he said, okay, in 200 years, people are going to read this next to Isaiah, and some really clever person's going to finally figure it out. That's what I think happened.
Yeah, that's what they thought. Yeah. So yeah. Oh, by the way, I want to show everybody my shirt. So it's like, see this?
That's cool.
I'm not Mormon, but he is, and let me tell you about his book.
That's funny.
That's awesome. That's great.
Anyways, I thought I'd wear that for my my Mormon friend, my Book of Mormon friend. Anyway, this is the King Follett sermon. At least this is the church's published version of it that was printed in the April 1971 Ensign. If you ever need to go and find where the church published what people are passing around as the King Follett sermon, remember, if you Google King Follett sermon, you'll also get the Joseph Smith papers, and you can see the 4 different accounts that were taken. I would strongly encourage everybody to read those 4 accounts that are recorded in the Joseph Smith papers and kind of dissect them and look at the differences in them, and really specifically about the language that's being used in these exact areas and how they differ. So again, we don't really know clearly exactly what Joseph Smith said, because there's a difference between the different recorders of the sermon. In some cases, it's actually very different.
We have another question.
Sure.
Is divine investiture of authority exclusive to the Son, or are there others that can receive that?
A divine investiture of authority? I'm not sure exactly what they're meaning by that.
I think divine investiture as the concept of the divine messenger, like we view Jesus as the divine messenger and authority to act in the Father's name.
No, I don't think that bears out that only Christ could do that, because we have examples of both in the Bible, and at least 2 clear examples in both the Bible and the Book of Mormon, where actually 2 prophets are doing the same thing, namely Elijah and Nephi, who seal the heavens and stop the rain. And they do so after having been given authority to do that and make that decision for themselves. And God honors and respects that decision. And so they actually seal the heavens, and God responds. So they have a divine investiture in the sense that they are the ones who are authorized to speak. They're not doing the divine will, such that God entrusts them so much to do what's right that he says, you know what, do what you think. I think that that's a very important concept to remember, that prophets can be, I mean, Moses, I think, had some of this, because he acted in ways that are different than the way that he was told by God, and God still honored and respected his decisions because he trusted him. So when he struck them
out, the angel of the Lord is that too?
The angel of the Lord. So my understanding, my issue with the angel of the Lord is that really has to be looked at contextually, like what we're talking about, because the angel of the Lord in many cases is actually just an image of Christ. The angel of the Lord is just a messenger. Yeah. And it can actually be him. So anybody who comes with a message from God is an angel of the Lord, a messenger of the Lord. And it can actually be himself. And the person to whom they're speaking may not know the difference. So
If it's
that's,
Christ or the image of Christ.
yeah,
that's
unless,
bearing
so
it.
if a messenger of God appears to you, you're probably going to fall down in some kind of worship or adoration of it, because it's glowing. And I mean, it's going to be awe. It's probably going to be somewhat disconcerting that this person is appearing in your presence
Yeah.
and then commanding you. I mean, you've got the angel that appeared to Alma the Younger that caused the earth to shake. You know, don't you know that I'm come from the presence of God? Does not my voice cause the earth to shake? So, I mean, yes, the divine authority of God is given to all those who are in unity with him. Once you are one with God, you can act with his authority because you're going to do his will. And I think that that's where that comes from.
Gotcha.
So at least that's my take on it. That's how I would argue that if anybody's having an issue with that. It's just anybody who is acting in one. And I think that that's what Jesus is praying for in John 17. He's praying that his disciples will adopt this close understanding of unity, and they will be truly one, and one not only with each other, but with God. But of course, then we look at, you know, them disagreeing throughout the book of Acts and having an argument.
They struggle with that.
Yeah, they're doing their best, I guess. So this is what's always puzzling to me is, you know, if you look at the King Follett sermon, it says God himself was once as we are now. Again, once as we are now does not mean a normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill human. It means he was human. It means God himself, the Father, possessed a mortal body. That does not negate the fact that the Spirit, which is God, inhabiting that physical body, was not God. It just means that he was also a man.
he sinned. It means he sinned.
Yeah, no, it means he sinned. It says, and he sits
means he was
enthroned.
a mortal sinner.
Yeah, this is the great secret. And if you look at the language, it's very, I don't think the language is clear, but I don't think it can be taken to mean what they're suggesting. If the veil were rent today. So now he's like, if the veil were rent today. So God was once a man, like you, he was human. But he says, if the veil were rent today, the great God who holds this world in orbit and who upholds all worlds and all things was by his power was to make himself visible. I say, you were to see him today, you would see him in form, in man, like a man, in form. Again, that's what he's talking about. He's talking about the Father at some time occupied a mortal experience. It does not mean it's the same kind of mortal experience as you. And I think that they take this language, God himself is once as we are now, and they go too far with it. Because God the Father is not going to have been like you. And it's specific because he goes down and he says, let's see, that God, it says, God himself, the Father of us all, dwelt on an earth the same as Jesus Christ did. And I will show up from the Bible. And I highlighted that in red because that's a very significant clarifying statement among the previous statements. He was a human like you, like Jesus, like all of us. Jesus was a human. He could be cut, he could bleed, he could be injured, he could get tired, he got hungry. I mean, yes, he had more capacity, I think, as a consequence of the deity that dwelled in his mortal body, but he was still a man, and he still was subject to the vicissitudes of mortality. And I think that to take that away from him is to negate the importance of his own mortal sojourn. And I think that that's not something that we should be doing. And then this is Jesus appears. Yeah.
I was
This is in
going to say,
John 20.
someone had a question about Alma 11.
Alma
in
11.
respect to the Trinity, where it says, now Zeezrom saith again unto him, is
there
the
more
Son
than
of
one
God,
God?
the very eternal Father? That passage.
Yeah,
What
again,
are your thoughts on that?
yeah, is there more than one God? Nay. Yeah, he says nay.
Yeah.
Again, the God they're referring to is Christ. And it could be that this is one of those examples, like Dimitri said, where there is an evolving or an understanding that is developing. So, for example, if I teach there's only one God and God himself will come down, and I am a person who listened to Abinadi, I may not have understood fully what Abinadi was talking about. Because the thing is that it is still true. So if the God of Israel is Jesus, which is clearly the case in the Book of Mormon, Jesus declares when he's present, I have a God and a Father. And if they don't understand anything more than that, it doesn't change the fact that Jesus is their Father and their God, that he will come down and take upon himself flesh. It doesn't change that understanding. So if you're saying, is there more than one God? He could have been referring to something like the Shema. That's another theory about that he's referring to the conceptualization that there's no other God, kind of using one God rhetoric similar to Isaiah. So that could have been somewhat what he was saying as well.
Can
So
I give a
don't
thought
think
on that?
Yeah, certainly.
I think another thing to remember too is when we read these scriptures, a lot of times we're reading stories or texts that are pressured by whatever the context is. And usually that context isn't like, all right, son, it's today's theology lesson, and we're going to give the whole philosophical rundown on Jesus and his nature. Like these are situations they're in where they have to just kind of speak whatever they're thinking at the time, and how they're written or whatever is another story. But
and I think John 20 is another passage that, if not read carefully, is confusing. I mean, Jesus earlier on in the passages, he says, do not hold on to me because I have not yet ascended to my Father, but go and tell my brothers, go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. I don't know what Mary would have understood from that, but I don't think that she would have understood that he was his own Father, or that he was consubstantially the second person of the triune God, that he was one in essence with the again, that conceptualization's absent. So if she understood that, great, I guess, whatever, but I don't see any evidence for that anywhere in the text. But if you keep reading down John, they start worshiping God. They start worshiping Jesus as God. The same thing happens in 2nd Nephi chapter or 3rd Nephi 11, where the apostles understand that God has a Father, but he's also the God of the earth, because he declares that he's the God of the earth. I am the God of the whole earth, and I have been slain for the sins of the world. He specifically says that. But they had just understood that he has a Father. So their understanding of gods is that once they are deity, they are one. They are unity. They are not different gods. And this is the idea that's rejecting a polytheistic worldview that sometimes people try to impose, not only in our theology and our texts, but also on Mormonism generally. We are not polytheists. If there is more than one God numerically, they are one. They are one God. They think, they act in concert with each other, which again is something that's very clearly articulated in John 14. I do the will of my Father. I say the words of my Father. The Holy Spirit will say the words that I give you. He'll repeat. I don't think that there's any understanding that they are different gods in the sense that they are. And this is again the world in which they find themselves, where people outside of Israel have different gods who have responsibility and have sovereignty over different elements of nature, whereas this unity is in concert with the whole earth.
So would you say the Book of Mormon or the Lamanites or Nephites, would they fall under a monotheistic belief?
Yes, they would have thought of themselves as not the strict monotheists that people today think.
Right.
But they would have considered themselves monotheists in the fact that we only worship one God. This idea of, so remember, monotheism, henotheism, polytheism, monolatry, these are new words. These are not old words. These words all arose in the last few hundred years. They're not like common concepts. Monotheism, as we understand it today, with respect to there's only one God in existence, did not exist in the ancient world. Nobody would have thought that way.
And I think it's sorry, Travis, didn't mean to.
No, you're fine. Go ahead. No, you're.
Yeah, no, I wanted to kind of point out here that, like, I'm really glad that was brought up with 3rd Nephi 11 and how the Nephites were worshiping him, but Jesus also showed by example, like how prayer was supposed to be done, how worship was supposed to be done, because the Book of Mormon never actually collapses the Father and the Son as being the same person or being. But like you were saying, it emphasizes their unity, their purpose, their authority, their divine nature. And so, yeah, the Book of Mormon does say that Christ is both the Father and the Son, but it has distinct roles for within. Just
and
like
even explains how. Yeah,
right.
He's the Father because of the creation. He's the Father. He's the Son because of his flesh. It specifically identifies where those roles are playing out with respect to his ministry. So
Okay,
I
and
think
so
it's
monotheistic, if I'm understanding, would more so in an ancient context would be basically henotheistic, right?
yeah, they're not going to really be concerned about other gods. They're going to be
Right.
focused on the worship of their God.
Right.
Monolatry, henotheism is kind of a branch of the umbrella term that is monolatry.
Okay.
So
yeah.
So
I have
we
a
say
thought
that.
too.
Go ahead, Dimitri.
Just real quick, like in this theme with Alma chapter 11 too, like I have the same thought. I'm super tempted to just recognize the monotheistic context and just say Amulek probably doesn't want to say God is anything but one. Like I just think that's a very strong motivator in the social context where I don't think Amulek is imagining metaphysics and ontology and he has that all fleshed out in his brain. He literally just knows like his life is on the line depending on what he says.
Well, in the preaching of Mosiah, again, the preaching of Abinadi is pretty fresh, especially since this is Alma and Amulek. So Alma the Younger has heard the preaching of his father, which came from Abinadi. So Abinadi's rhetoric is what he's referring to, and Amulek would have been taught that same rhetoric. So this is the teachings that are being passed down, and so their conceptualization. However, could it have been fuzzy? Sure. Remember, Moroni and Mormon are not redactors. They're not trying to fix the narratives. They're trying to present the history of their people, and that includes a developing understanding of theology, if indeed you make that argument that they have a different understanding of the nature of God or the numeric existence of gods. Certainly. Now this is the second part of the King Follett sermon that everybody always ignores. So remember, the King Follett sermon was published in 1971 in the April and May ensign in 2 parts. People always forget that it's 2 parts. People who say I've read the King Follett sermon, I would say about 80 to 90% of them have never even heard that there is a second part. And that second part says things like this. We say that God himself is a self-existing being. Remember, this is in the same context as saying God was once a man. He's saying also God himself is a self-existing being. Who told you so? It is correct enough, but how did you get it into your heads? Who told you that man did not exist in like manner upon the same principles? Man does not exist upon the same principles. Man does exist upon the same principles. God made a tabernacle and put a spirit into it, and it became a living soul. And he refers to the Bible, probably holding a Bible up. How does it read in the Hebrew? It does not say in the Hebrew that God created the spirit of man. It says God made man out of the earth and put into him Adam's spirit, and so became a living body. The mind or the intelligence which man possesses is co-equal, co-eternal with God himself. I know that my testimony is true. Hence, when I talk to these mourners, again, mourners who have what have they lost? Their relatives and friends are only separated from their bodies. I like this because it not only reiterates the fact that Joseph Smith is clearly identifying the Father as an eternally existing God, but also that man was in the beginning with God, as he identifies in Abraham and in the Book of Mormon in section 88, section 93, and a whole bunch of other places throughout the Doctrine and Covenants. So this idea of man having co-eternally existing with the Father, but at a subordinate or lower intelligence, which is what's identified clearly in Abraham. I am dwelling on the immortality of the spirit of man. It is logical to say the intelligence of the spirits is immortal, and yet that has a beginning. The intelligence of spirits had no beginning, neither will it have an end. That is good logic. That which has a beginning may have an end. There never was a time when there were not spirits. And I like this because for me, this reconciles the conceptualization of an adversary and makes it make sense that God didn't create the adversary out of nothing and then inflict him on humanity. The reason that he's here is because this is the destined place for those spirits after they depart from the presence of God. Whether with a body or not, this is where you go. And God can't uncreate them. He can't blink them out of existence. And if God can create them out of nothing, I never understood why he can't make them into nothing. which is what Jehovah's Witnesses believe. And I actually appreciate that theology because to me, it's at least consistent. This is John. This is just more rhetoric with John 10 and 30. I'm going to leave this up for a second. Somebody can pause and screenshot that and read it if they want to. This is several sources that I've quoted before in a couple of the discussions I've had previously. Again, I'll leave this up for a few seconds. I'm not just going to go through and read these, but these are Trinitarians who are rejecting the fact that the New Testament does not teach the formal doctrine of the Trinity. It's in the Anchor Bible Dictionary, Harper's Bible Dictionary, the Catholic University of America Press are 3 publications. Millard Erickson rejects that the Trinity is clearly taught in the Bible, but he says that it is the true doctrine. It's what we extrapolate from it, but it's not clearly taught. The language isn't found there. Shirley Guthrie, Roger Olson, who actually is Roger Olson is a Arminian who produced a series called For and Against Calvinism with another, I can't remember who the Calvinist was that he wrote the books with, but anyways, the two of them wrote 2 excellent books that I've got my video on books that I would recommend people read. Charles Rye, again, these are, I like his, he says, in the second half of the 4th century, 3 theologians from the province of Cappadocia in Asia Minor gave definitive shape to the doctrine of the Trinity. But many doctrines are accepted by evangelicals as being clearly taught in the scriptures for which there is no proof texts. The doctrine of the Trinity furnishes the best example of this. It is fair to say that the Bible does not clearly teach the doctrine of the Trinity. In fact, there is not even one proof text. If by proof text we mean a verse or passage that clearly states that there is one God who exists in 3 persons. The above illustrations prove the fallacy of concluding that if something is not proof texted in the Bible, that we cannot clearly teach the results. If that were so, I could never teach the doctrine of the Trinity or the deity of Christ or the deity of the Holy Spirit. So again, it's these ideas of saying that things aren't clearly taught, so we can't believe them. Go ahead, Dimitri.
Travis, I think you just need to realize that these are all heretics.
Except they're not. that's the problem, is that like these are creedal Trinitarians, because as you can
no
see
one would
from that,
consider them heretics.
he says if we need a proof text for it, if we have to have it in the Bible and we can't believe it unless it is, he says the deity of Christ or the deity of the Holy Spirit. Those are formulations. Those are ideas that were found in Christianity after the biblical texts. And so those are readings of the text. Those are the way people read them. They're not clear. That's why people make the argument that Jesus never claimed to be divine or God.
Right.
But he's got
the
word professor in there. That's like synonymous with heretic.
Heck yeah. Yeah. Those are, you know, and my favorite is people like, those are liberal biblical scholars.
And then they change their tune whenever they start to agree with them.
These are long, and I'm not going to read all these. The only reason I put these up is basically just do a blanket illustration. I often say that if you'll read the first few verses of any of Paul's letters, he has similar rhetoric in all of them that identifies, like Paul, this is in Romans 1, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, set apart for the gospel of God, which he promised beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures, the gospel concerning his Son, who was descended from David according to the flesh, who was declared to be the Son of God with the power according to the Spirit. And that's actually some of the language that identifies Jesus as not previously the Son of God, but declared to be the Son of God. People who mince words will often point to this kind of rhetoric and say, Paul's not claiming that Jesus was always eternally divine. He's claiming that he was a specific and special servant of God who was claimed to be, declared to be a servant of God. And this is where you get people like Arians who are arguing this kind of idea about Jesus Christ. With which we would, of course, disagree. Jesus Christ our Lord, through whom we have received grace and apostleship to bring about the obedience of faith among all the Gentiles for the sake of the name, including you who are called to belong to Jesus Christ. To all God's beloved in Rome who are called to be saints, grace, peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And I always wonder what people are thinking as he salutes them using this kind of language, specifically since, with the exception of the Romans, which are probably Israelite converts rather than Gentile converts, because remember, Paul didn't convert the Roman saints. They're from another person's work. But the Corinthians and Galatians, it's the same thing. These are probably Gentile converts, and so their understanding of the nature of God and gods would be very different from that of an Israelite. So I wonder that Paul neglected to clarify what he was talking about in that sense.
I always appeal to the understanding if Paul so-called had an experience with Jesus in the jail or on the road, shouldn't he have referenced Jesus as God in
Right.
one of his beginning of his epistles if he believed in the Trinity?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
he's
he
not.
doesn't say it once.
Yeah, he's not really using that kind of language formally. It's one of the reasons why people like Hebrews and like to identify it as Pauline, because it does have a very high Christology, where he's quoting from the Psalms, etc., and saying, God, my God, etc., and saying that this is the deification, this is the exaltation of Christ. But again, that would be more language that he becomes that rather than previously was that. And on that note, these are some verses and arguments for the idea, especially in Hebrews and in Philippians, where Jesus is changing. He is adding something to his nature. People say God doesn't change. Well, if Jesus is God, this is clear examples of him adding something to him through experiencing a mortal experience, at least gaining a physical body of flesh and bone. I've never really understood that. God doesn't change. God's unchangeable. Yeah, but it must be referring to something other than his physical nature or his ability to acquire additional experience. So I was talking to Rob Bowman, who's he's not well known, but he is he's a widely written, I guess, evangelical. Robert M. Bowman. He runs a site called the Institute for Religious Research, and he writes a lot on Mormonism. So he says he's a biblical scholar who focuses on writing about Mormonism, which is kind of an odd thing to do for a biblical scholar, but not to cast aspersions at him. But ultimately, he says, he and I had a discussion. I'll have to post it one of these days. About that. He kind of did the Moroni 818 kind of a, God never changes idea. And in Mormon Latter-day Saint theology, he does change. And I questioned him on it, and he actually conceded that, well, yeah, Jesus adds to himself a mortality, and he does gain a body of flesh and bone. And yes, he gains experiential knowledge, but it's only in his human form. And again, he starts arguing from the perspective of the hypostatic union, which again is not a doctrine that is clearly articulated or found anywhere in the biblical text, but it is a post-biblical invention of philosophers.
There's another question. Did Jesus pass through the veil of forgetfulness?
I think that he must have to some degree, certainly, because it says, though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered. I think that he did learn as a child. Now, however, we do have him teaching the doctors of the law at 12 years old, if you believe the accounts in the New Testament. So he accelerated his process, but I do think that he had to learn. Some people opine and hypothesize that was the purpose of his departure into the wilderness in the Synoptic Gospels, where he goes out to the wilderness to fast and to pray for 40 days. Basically, he's kind of coming into his own. He's figuring out his role and his relationship to the Father, communing with the Father, and basically he's nourishing himself on the good word of the Father and learning kind of who and what he is. And that's why he comes out stronger when Baal, the adversary, comes to test him, because he's been strengthened in his mortality. Remember, in his mortal state, he also prays for help and assistance from the Father, especially when he's undergoing the atonement. This is so one of the things that now I can't remember what his name was, Joseph did, that what I found was odd is he kept quoting the Comma Johannium. And this is a complicated argument. I hope you guys can follow it. I thought it was hilarious. Other people may not think it's as funny or maybe bored with me by this time.
I love this argument, especially when we get into new translations.
Wait, it gets better. Yeah, it gets better. So the argument is this. He quotes from Genesis. It's 26, I think, is Genesis 50:26 or thereabouts is where the book of Genesis ends, chapter 50, verse 26 or 7 or whatever. And then it goes on to verse 33 is the JST, 33 or 34 or whatever is the JST. And that adds this additional prophecy of Joseph Smith as being a descendant of Joseph sold into Egypt, right? And that was given to the prophet by revelation. And he says right there, the fact that he wrote himself in to a prophecy that can't be found in any ancient manuscript is a completely disqualifying claim. And I thought it was funny because he also quoted as a Trinitarian proof text 1 John 5:7, which, as anybody who has kind of delved into biblical scholarship to any degree knows, this is the comma Johannium. The comma Johannium, or the John comma, or the comma of John, or whatever you want to say, is a very well-known addition to the King James Bible. It is not found in any of our Latin manuscripts or any of the Greek manuscripts. It doesn't appear until the 15th century. So you're talking many hundreds of years. It's a minority reading of the text. In fact, I don't know if anybody can hear this. Let me start playing this. See, tell me if you can hear this on the YouTube.
Yeah, they can hear you.
Can they hear
They're
that?
talking about the video.
Yeah.
Talking about the video, yeah.
Can they hear the video?
The video?
I can't hear it.
You can't hear it? Let's see.
Yeah, no.
I think I didn't select the
I can't hear it, but I see the face and I can imagine what he's probably saying.
I didn't select there is a let me do this. Stop share. Hold on. Let me do that this way.
There we go.
Because there is an option for you to share, and you can do share sound. That's it. Aha. That'll fix it. Hold on. This is it. Okay, share. Okay, what can you guys see?
A black screen. There
okay, you can see it. Oh, do you see it?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Can you see the whole thing, or is it just what can you see?
I can see the preview for the next.
Okay, I'm on the
second screen. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, hold on. Let me stop share again. Let me do it this way. So this is, I always forget to click this stupid share sound box. Okay, share. All right, what about now?
Here we go. Yeah, that's much
okay.
better.
Okay, good. All right. So here it is.
No one who believes in a majority text theory should ever support the comma Johannium, because the majority text doesn't contain it either. It is a much later edition. It is found only in Latin manuscripts and only in very late 14th century and beyond Greek manuscripts. And if we include it, what we're saying is the text of the New Testament can be thoroughly corrupted. And I am not only uncomfortable with that, I think there's tremendous evidence against it.
Who was that?
That's just a progressive liberal scholar.
That is James White.
That's James White?
That's baby James White. Wow.
That is none other than James White. So I posted, I was going to use that because I don't think he'll know who James White is, but he kept posting videos of Jeff Durbin. And if he knows anything about Jeff Durbin, he should know James White, because James White is basically Jeff Durbin's daddy. So that's kind of the best way to look at that, because I don't think Jeff Durbin has ever had an original thought that he didn't get directly from James White. Jeff Durbin's made some admissions about how he's never even read John Calvin, and he's a reformed Baptist. So there you go.
No.
Yeah. So this is another video, a much longer one. I was going to play this if he didn't get the other point. This is actually really good. He goes into a very detailed analysis of the Johannian comma and how those who regard it as authentic are probably doing so and shooting themselves in the foot. That was his argument.
When you look at
I wanted to, so, and again, this is just my identifying other texts that are not clearly, that are regarded as additions. And those are 1 John 5:7, of course, the Johannan comma. It's a Trinitarian proof text. Luke 9, verse 56, Matthew 17:21, this kind goeth not out but by prayer and fasting. Mark 16, the long ending of Mark 6-20, John 7:53, 8 and then 8 and 11 are examples of additional texts that people either italicize or they question the authenticity of those texts as being original to the Greek. This is another one arguing that if he was going to focus on, there's only one God, Baal or Baal Zavul is identified in Matthew 12, Mark 3, Luke 11. He's the prince, he's the God of this world, is identified in Matthew 4, John 12, John 14, 2 Corinthians 4. So the idea is that even in the New Testament, under the teachings and tutelage of those who were apostles of Jesus Christ, people still believed in, not only the Israelites of Jesus's day believed in Baal or Baal Zavul was a different god, but also believed that he had some kind of authority in this earth as a king or as a god of this earth. And so it's something that is pretty pronounced throughout the biblical text. So if people are, there can't be strict monotheism as a consequence of some of these ideas that are found throughout the text. I'm not really clear on why people do that.
Can I add a thought real quick?
Sure.
I'm just thinking, I know some of these statements about the nature of God in the Christian text, God is one or whatever. They're not just motivated by the need to explain God. They're also motivated by the religious climate where you literally have gods like warring with each other. This is one of the things I just learned in some classes, but the Christians really want to get away from this idea that there's any possibility that like the Father and the Son are going to betray each other, or someone's going to rise up and overthrow the other, or just anything like that.
Yeah. And it's kind of an absurd idea that's passed around. And I think that this is why I reject any understanding of a monotheism in the sense that there are one or unity, because again, the Israelites would not have viewed their God this way. They would have understood a divine council. At least we historically believe they would have, based on the evidences we see not only in the ancient literature that predates the biblical text and Ugarit and stuff, but also in the stuff that we see in the biblical texts that survives attempts to probably kind of whitewash some of that material. So yeah.
Well, wouldn't that? So this is kind of an interesting little parallel, because you're right. The one thing that I do see is that there is a definitive line, though, from pre-exilic Hebrews to the post-exilic, around that time of the Babylonian conquest. And so, like, you see a lot of the divine council prior to Babylon, and then a lot of strict, intolerant monotheism after, particularly in the Judaized reforms.
Yeah, I just saw a question I wanted to answer from Greg Fessia. It says, why did we need heavenly parents to form our spirits, but God doesn't require such a creator? Okay, so the answer to that is that we don't. And so the idea of a divine feminine or a mother in heaven doesn't necessitate that we needed them to, quote, form our spirits. We needed a father and a mother because it appears from what we see reflected in mortality that what we need is a man and a woman joined together to create a covenant family. So in order for God to organize, meaning to call together to himself all of the eternally existing us into a family unit, it required that. That would be my best explanation for that. And I think that that's most consistent with what we do know. But again, we don't know much about Heavenly Mother. And we certainly aren't clear on whether or not God either organized spirits, meaning he took materials and made a spirit and then put an intelligence inside the spirit, and that's how he became our father, or if the spirits pre-existed and he simply called them into a covenant relationship. That's the view I take. But again, both views are probably accessible within the realms of our theology. I don't think that it's necessarily something.
You don't believe the third view, Travis?
What's the third view? That's a hybrid.
The view.
It's all just a chimeric entity, don't you know?
No, I think it's the covenantal theology. I think it's beautiful, and that's why I take that view. I think the concept of our spirits being eternal, and we saw the Father and wanted to obtain what the Father had, and he called us into a unity, and we chose that. I think that's a
Yeah.
cool.
So, well, the idea is
Oh.
I think to me, it answers the question of why does God have a body, right? Well, God has a body because he chooses to, and we get bodies because we want to be like him.
Right.
For whatever reason that was attractive to us. It was something that enticed us. We saw God, we saw him in his glory, his power and authority, his intelligence. We were impressed by him, we were smitten by him, we were attracted to him, we were brought in, we were drawn into him, whatever that all means. And I think that as Latter-day Saints, we need to be a little bit more careful being so certain about what we know, because there's a lot of these things that become a little bit, in fact, that's why Latter-day Saints get stumped, because they're like, oh, I know all this stuff. And, we have a heavenly father and a heavenly mother and parents. And then somebody starts to critique and criticize the finer points of that idea. And then you kind of realize, I don't really know. And so it's best to not be so certain about these gray areas, and also to be aware and recognize that these gray areas exist.
Well, and we need to be more willing to say, I don't know about a lot of things.
Right.
And I think that's a big, big issue. Like,
Or
especially,
say, I've thought about it. Here's what I think.
Yeah.
But that's not a revealed doctrine.
Don't
Right.
posit the church's position is this, where it's
Yeah.
not a position yet.
Right. The gospel according to Lion, or the gospel according to Travis, or Chuck, or whomever. Like that, I think we need to be willing to couch that in there. It's like, this is the way that I've understood it, whether or not this is official, whatever. But
Right.
I think that's the thing we need to be ready to see here, is that there are things we don't know. And I think we need to have that humility to say, look,
Speak
we
for
don't know.
yourself.
Yeah.
I will fight you, Dimitri.
I will cut you. No,
No, I really would. No, there's a pen.
that's what everybody always says. I will cut you.
Oh gosh.
My favorite. It's one of my favorite scenes in an Eddie Murphy movie. Has everybody seen the Nutty Professor?
Yes.
So somebody says something that they're out to get him or something, and his mom, it's him playing his own mom, but he's like, I'm gonna get my razor. I'm glad I brought my razor.
I will cut you. Boy.
So no, it's a great we have a great theology, because it not only has some very concise and consistent theology that has been developed over generations of time, and it's consistent with what we can see in the biblical text. It's consistent with what scholars are discovering about the biblical text. That's the thing that I find most fascinating, is a lot of the stuff that we can point to as our theology has become very consistent and is apparent from biblical scholarship and from historians. And I see that as I see some of my friends that are involved in those fields share their discoveries and what they've written about with me. But I'm really grateful for the fact that that we do also have the ability, and as Joseph Smith said, that in fact, I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna find it real quick. You guys can see. There's this great quote.
Well, and one of the things, like, I love Truman Madsen. I don't know how often you guys listen to his lectures and things like that, but one of the things that he brought up is that how Joseph, when in the Restoration, he not only brought the gospel for us here, but he established a gospel for the cosmos, for the stars, for the space age. And I think that's something, truly amazing to think about.
Yeah, my favorite is, so this is a quote. This is says, speaking at a funeral for Judge Elias Higbee on August 13th of 1843, the prophet said, had I inspiration, revelation, and lungs to communicate what my soul has contemplated in times past, there is not a soul in this congregation but would go to their homes and shut their mouths in everlasting silence on religion till they had learned something. Why be so certain that you comprehend the things of God when all things with you are so uncertain? You are welcome to all the knowledge and intelligence I can impart to you. And then after preparing a little bit, he says, that which has been hid from before the foundation of the world is revealed to babes and sucklings in the last days. The world is reserved unto burning in these last days. He shall send Elijah the prophet. He shall reveal the covenants of the fathers in revelation to the children, and the covenants of children in relation to the fathers. And so, again, it's this idea that if we really are humble and we are willing to ask the Lord and keep our revelations to ourselves, and not think like a lot of apostates, people who end up leaving the church and starting their own sect of Mormonism, I think that demonstrates a great deal of arrogance and pride, that I figured it out. I read this verse. I found the real revelation. I combed through the catacombs and I found the original copy of the thing. My version of this is better. So I think that if we view it that way, we're demonstrating a lot of arrogance, and we need to be a little bit more intellectually consistent and humble. So anyways, I'm going to wait and see YouTube.
What's your, I think you didn't have it in your PowerPoint. Maybe you did. Did you have Hebrews 1, 6 through 9 in your PowerPoint?
Yeah, it was there. Yeah. So yeah, I skipped over it. I turned it off before, but yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and shut down. I have a very, very early. I have to get up at 3 a.m, which is not very many hours from now, because I have a 4.5 hour drive and have to be somewhere at 8 o'clock. So,
no worries. Thanks.
I am sad that Joseph didn't show. This is my first live from the channel. I hope to be able to do a few more. I'm glad we had people watching, and that those who did watch, I hope that you enjoyed yourselves, or I hope we learned something. I appreciate the comments and the questions, and some of them were very, very touching, and some of them were a little bit difficult to understand, but I appreciate all of the participation. And thank you guys for joining. You certainly turned this into what otherwise would have been me monologuing about my own stuff into more of an educational and entertaining discussion. So thanks for joining.
Anytime.
For bearing
everybody,
with my
everybody watching
jokes.
again, thank you all, and thanks for joining. And this has been great. All right, we'll see y'all.